Hello, welcome to Destiny Palmistry. I have another example reading. In this video, we explore a rare and fascinating palm featuring multiple double lines, including a double lifeline and double fate line. But if you would like your hand featured in a video such as this, check out my member options to join my channel. Very exciting. We do live streams and all sorts of perks and benefits. But for now, join me as I decode the meanings behind these unusual signs and I reveal what they say about the personality and the potential life path. I shall bring up the non-dominant hand first. Here we are. This I've already drawn on here. So I'm showing you the non-dominant hand first to give you a bit of an understanding of the similarities and between the dominant and the non-dominant. Not everyone has the same kind of lines. Often one hand can show certain features and the other hand doesn't. So we look at, I suppose, in a way, the past and the present on how things have shaped on an internal level and how things are shaping on an external level on what's actually happening. So these lines I will show in a bit more detail, some of the fate lines and everything on the dominant hand. So here you are. I can see this is a narrow looking hand with long fingers, which appears what's called the water hand. The water hand represents emotional, intuitive, and often idealistic nature. So the more narrow the palm is, the more these qualities are intensified. Common traits that come with this shape hand, which can be redeemed or changed with other features, but common traits for that feature alone is someone creative with a spiritual focus. They can channel emotional energy into things like art and healing, spiritual pursuits. A double lifeline on this shaped hand is perfect for the water hand because it is like suggests like strong vitality. It gives that strength and protection. It can act like a guardian almost, indicating resilience, something like potentially spiritual guidance as well, like a guardian angel. This person may have even lived two distinct phases in life, perhaps a major shift in their career, identity, or their worldview. You can see here there's a double headline. So that headline represents that two distinct mindsets that can even be a support on the mental side of things. Sometimes that double lifeline represents more like a close bond with a parent or a mentor, someone who has helped shape their life. So I've circled this Mount Venus here because it looks a little deflated, which can mean that in the past this person has lost a bit of zeal, a bit of energy, potentially due to a love relationship. If it's anything else, I would need to do like a consultation with the person and dig a little deeper into the cause of this deflation or some loss of energy. Now, I shall bring up the dominant hand and we shall get right into more detail of these lines. So in this dominant hand, it shows the similar lifeline. Just get me a pen here. There's a lifeline there. And the second lifeline there. A little bit of crisscrossing going on there. So the second line on the outside here reaches outwards, like towards the Mount of Moon and Pluto area. So rather than tucking into the thumb area, so this often means a person might leave their birth country at some stage. I didn't point out on the non-dominant hand previously, but there is a long travel line on there, which also represents a person potentially going overseas. So potentially leaving their country of birth is represented mainly by the outgoing lifeline. The double lifeline is not an indicator of that on its own, but that kind of helps because there's like a second life. So there is a connecting line here. I think it connects to the inner lifeline here. So that can be a little bit confusing without having a discussion with the owner. However, it can literally represent a connection to the old life, meaning the person returns to the country at some point, or they keep their connection with that birth country, potentially due to family. Or it can represent something such as a loss. And if we were to time this, it would be in their 40s. But because it does look like it connects, I would say it's acting like a bridge to the past or to the previous life, so to speak. So the lifeline is fairly steady here. I can see that there's not many breaks or crosses. It's quite a smooth flow of energy. So because it's free of those markings, that can suggest a relatively easy life without major disruptions. So it reflects a steady flow of energy, vital and emotional resilience, vitality and emotional resilience. And when there is a steady lifeline, that often points to a person with a strong immune system, someone who has consistent health patterns, someone who recovers well and maintains balance. Having that second lifeline is that support, not only mentally, but also physically for health reasons. And the smooth flow of the line also represents someone a bit more calm and grounded. The absence of these dramatic markings indicate that the person can be emotionally centered, not prone to any particular extremes. So they might prefer harmony and routine over any kind of chaos, and they probably try and avoid unnecessary drama. So without these crossing lines, which are usually obstacles, it can also mean the person is self-directed, not easily swayed by other people's opinions or life events. And the fact that the lines are a little bit different in the headline and the heart line on the dominant hand, that can make a slight difference. But just speaking of the lifeline on its own, the lifeline shows a generally steady kind of a path. So the headline here is not really a double headline. I'll change the color of my pen. We have a little bit of a mess going on with the headline. We have a fork, which can kind of represent the same as a double headline. So the fork gives two points of view, a more creative side, a more emotional side, and then a more practical business-like mind. Now, the fact that the non-dominant hand had such a long, deep headline that reached far down into the lunar, there's a very long headline. So that's not the case here. See if does that come away? Can I get rid of those? Because it's not there. Okay, get rid of those. So the shorter headline here gives but more of the practical aspect rather than the deep thinking, overthinking aspect. So potentially the person might have tended to or had the tendency to overthink things and to get overly deep into things can be, in some instances, turn into depression because of the overthinking. However, because it's not on the dominant hand, that is like the redeeming quality of it. But the heart line here, I'm not sure. I should have looked at that a bit clearly. It actually looks like there is a island just here. If it's not an island, it's like a doubling. But the heart line does show this sudden change. It's like there may have been some emotional issue that the person might have then turned their mindset, which shows on the two different headlines. And this kind of a kink or a turn towards the idealistic personality in the realm of relationships and love matters particularly. So I'll go into the discussion about the love life side of it shortly. I'll just first go into this career section because I had these career lines already marked here in the green. And so we have two career lines, and one starts up higher or directly from the lifeline. So that can represent a more traditional start to the career. But then there's another fate line starting from the lifeline down further. And that's that duality coming out again. So that to me shows that there's been a change in the career life. And where this first line ends and then a second line starts, where they cross the headline is around after 35 into the 40s, the change already happening, and right through 40s, there's to the end of the 40s, there's another change here. So it's just under the heart line. If it's right on the heart line, it's usually 50, just a little bit under, so it's around 49. There is another shift in this career line and then rises quite steadily along that path for quite a few years. But then there's this, like, it does continue, but then there's this secondary line coming in again. So there's this tiny, here, these little fragments of thoughts and ideas that are forming. So these are new lines that are forming, and they are trying to connect to this top green line that I'm scribbling over here now. That's a bit messy. I shouldn't do that. So that, can I rub that out? Ding. Yes. So that is connecting this second fate line. So that can represent another income source. It doesn't necessarily mean another job or a business or career, but it can do. Because there's two lines, that often goes towards the business side of things. So there is at least multiple sort of goals, multiple projects, or multiple jobs that the person does. Potentially that's what people do when they're in business, because they're running the business, so they have multiple things to do. In some instances, the double fate line can represent support from somebody else, an external support like a mentor, partner, or spiritual guide, somebody. Other times the second line can represent one public role and then another revealing a more private, soul-driven kind of a journey. So two distinctly different journeys in life. And here, because they are sort of away from each other, I wouldn't say that that's representing a partner in business or anything like that, usually you would need the line to be running alongside. So if you had them running alongside nice and close like that, then that would represent more like your business partner or marriage partner, somebody who's very supportive in that kind of thing. I will bring up the last slide here. So I have the question of love or relationships, and on the dominant hand, she does have a nice strong union line there. It is slightly downward curving by the look of it. There is one short line that can represent an early relationship, early in life, and then there is another line that's up higher which represents a relationship much later in life. In a situation where if the person is not in a long-term relationship, this long line can simply mean the capacity for commitment and connection. So it can mean a strong desire for readiness for partnership, even if circumstances haven't aligned. And from a karmic or spiritual perspective, it could point to like life lessons around independence and self-love. Past life entanglements can also come into that. There's alternative meanings to these relationship or so-called marriage lines. I've not really found them to be accurate as a marriage line on any hand in this modern day and age. And alternatively, we can look at these as expressions of love. The person may have had some kind of profound emotional bond that didn't culminate into a formal kind of a marriage. It could be anything such as a caregiver role, soul friendships, spiritual devotion, or just somebody who can be devoted friend, for example. From a timing perspective, like I said before, the lower line would represent potentially a relationship or union early in life. A line in the middle can represent around the 30 mark, which is kind of, I suppose, standard to have a line right in the middle of this mount. And a line up higher can represent a relationship much later, above 42, all the way up to 60, 70 even. So just depends on each individual. But the main thing is that these three lines show there is potential for three deep connections with somebody else in this person's life. So I mentioned with the heart line how it reaches to the Jupiter, Mount of Jupiter there in the previous slide. That shows idealism and how that heart line seemed to sort of just suddenly rise. So this long middle union line here, that can represent the same. So somebody with like high standards or waiting for their soulmate to come along, or just waiting for this connection. So regarding the fingerprints, both hands, there's many whorls, and whorls suggest that strong individuality. Somebody with a unique worldview and resistance to conformity, so quite stuck in their ways or determined in their particular ways. They can appear on those who have a more mystical leanings or deeper inner lives. It shows emotional complexity. They may experience intense feelings, but they may struggle to express or share those feelings easily. And with that fingerprint pattern, combined with these relationship lines, could mean that some relationships just didn't resonate because they need this extraordinary emotional or intellectual compatibility to connect on a long-term kind of a level. If you are interested in getting into palmistry on a more deeper level regarding the fingerprints and things like that, I do have my various levels on my membership. The higher the level, the more in depth we can go into the understanding of all the fingerprints and all the lines. I would love to see you join my channel. That would be awesome. I also do have a subscription on Facebook. You can find me on facebook.com/Destiny Palmistry. But most of all, I'd love to see you here, and I look forward to doing more of these readings. Thanks very much. See ya, bye.